Hey guys, tonight we are stepping out of the cozy glow of our screens and into a world that's wilder, woollier, and perhaps a little more goat-legged than you might expect. You're leaving behind the gentle hum of modern life and venturing into the ancient heart of Greece, specifically a place called Arcadia. Imagine dense, whispering forests, sun-dappled clearings, rocky outcrops where wild thyme grows, and the constant, murmuring soundtrack of nature, buzzing bees, rustling leaves, trickling streams. It feels ancient, untouched, maybe even a little unnerving. Honestly, if you encountered some of the things we're about to discuss out there, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling up to it, drop your location and the time in the comments below. It's always cool to see where everyone's tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing on the edge of this place, Arcadia, a region nestled in the Peloponnese Mountains. In the ancient world, this wasn't just a geographical location. It was a state of mind, a symbol of a rustic, unspoiled paradise. Think of it as the ancient Greek version of a get-away-from-it-all destination, except the locals were less likely to offer you a latte and more likely to be half-goat. This is the domain of Pan. Now, Pan isn't your average, garden-variety deity. He's a god, sure, but he's not sitting on Mount Olympus sipping nectar with the fancy crowd. Pan belongs to the earth, the rocks, the trees. He's the god of the wild, of shepherds and their flocks, of mountain wilds, hunting, and rustic music. You might picture him, if you dare, as a creature of contradictions. From the waist up, he often looks like a sturdy, bearded man, perhaps with a mischievous glint in his eyes. But look down, and you see the shaggy legs, cloven hooves, and tail of a goat. And perched atop his head? Often, little horns peeking out from his tangled hair. His nature mirrors his appearance, a mix of human and animal, civilized and wild. On one hand, he's a protector. Shepherds would pray to him for the safety and fertility of their sheep and goats. You could imagine him, unseen, guiding flocks through treacherous mountain passes or warding off predators. He's connected to fertility and the vibrant, untamed energy of life that bursts forth in spring. He represents the raw, primal forces of nature that are both beautiful and potentially terrifying. And that terrifying part? Yeah, that's where things get interesting. Pan is also the source of panic. You see, one of his less charming habits was to suddenly appear in lonely places, startling travelers or causing sudden, unreasoning fear in crowds or armies. This wasn't always malicious. Sometimes it was just the unnerving effect of encountering something so fundamentally wild and other. But the feeling of sudden, inexplicable terror that grips you when you're alone in the woods at dusk? The ancient Greeks knew exactly who to blame for that. It's a mainstream historical fact that the word panic derives directly from Pan's name and his reputation for causing sudden, irrational fear. So if you ever feel that sudden jolt of anxiety for no clear reason, just know you're experiencing a little touch of Pan. Maybe try not to dwell on that as you drift off. His domain isn't like a manicured garden, it's gloriously messy and unpredictable. You can almost feel the ancient energy of Arcadia as you walk through it in your mind. The air is thick with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. Sunlight filters through the dense canopy, creating shifting patterns on the forest floor. The sounds are everywhere: the chirping of unseen birds, the rustle of small animals in the undergrowth, the distant bleating of sheep, and the sighing of the wind through the trees. This is where Pan lives, where he roams freely, less in a specific house and more in the very fabric of the landscape itself. Caves are his resting places, mountain springs his watering holes, and hidden valleys his playgrounds. Historians still argue whether Pan was originally a purely Arcadian deity whose worship spread, or if he was a more ancient, widespread nature spirit who became specifically associated with Arcadia over time. There's a quirky or fringe tidbit about his origins too. Some myths say he was the son of Hermes and a nymph, while others give him entirely different parentage, linking him to Penelope, yes, Odysseus's wife, though in a rather scandalous version of the myth involving multiple suitors and a lot of confusion. It just goes to show that even for the gods, family trees can be complicated, maybe even more complicated than figuring out your phone's privacy settings. He's a solitary figure, for the most part, preferring the company of animals and the whispers of the wind to the bustling cities of men. But he isn't always alone. The wild places he inhabits are also home to other creatures of myth, particularly the nymphs. And it's the nymphs who bring us to the heart of tonight's story. These spirits of nature, tied to trees, springs, mountains, flit through the forests and meadows, graceful and elusive, almost like the shimmering heat haze on a summer day. Pan sees them. Oh yes, he sees them. And despite his wildness, his goat-like legs, his sometimes frightening nature, Pan, like any being, feels desires. He feels curiosity, perhaps loneliness, and certainly, a yearning for connection. Especially when he sees the nymphs dancing, their movements as fluid and natural as the streams they inhabit. He watches them from the shadows, a strange mix of awe and longing in his wild heart. He is the spirit of this place, and they are too, but they move with a lightness he, with his heavy hooves, can only envy. He wants to be part of their world, to be noticed, perhaps even admired, despite being the creature who embodies the very wildness they belong to, but from which they sometimes seem to shy away. And as you imagine him watching, hidden behind a thicket of ancient oak, you can feel the intensity of his gaze, the stirrings of a plan forming in his mind. A plan to bridge the gap between his solitary, wild existence and their graceful, communal dances. A plan that involves the very essence of his being, the sounds of the wild given form. As you watch Pan watching the nymphs, hidden among the ancient trees, you realize his connection to this wild place isn't just about inhabiting it, it's about being part of its very pulse. And the pulse of Arcadia is expressed in sound. Pan didn't need a music teacher, or even a tutorial video. Thankfully, no ancient Greek Wi-Fi, because the world around him was his symphony orchestra and his classroom all rolled into one. He was born into a world vibrating with noise, the deep thrum of the earth, the sharp crack of a twig underhoof, the gentle sigh of wind through pine needles that sounds almost like a whisper, the frantic buzzing of a trapped fly, the distant, mournful cry of a hawk circling high above. Think about it, from the moment he came into being, whether he was tumbled out of a cave or born in a hidden glade, his ears were filled with this constant, shifting soundscape. Unlike the gods on Olympus who might listen to lyres and human choirs, Pan heard the raw, unfiltered music of existence. He heard the gurgle of water finding its way over rocks, the rustle of dry leaves skittering across a path like tiny, unseen dancers, the chorus of cicadas on a hot afternoon that can be absolutely deafening, the lowing of cattle, or the bleating of sheep echoing across a valley. These weren't just background noises to him. They were the language of his home, the rhythm of his life. His first musical inclinations weren't about creating structured melodies or hitting specific notes in a scale. They were about mimicry. He would listen intently, head tilted, those little horns perhaps twitching, and then try to replicate the sounds he heard. The trill of a bird, the buzz of a bee, the bleat of a lamb lost from the flock. You can almost picture him, a young, perhaps slightly awkward god creature, trying to whistle like a thrush or hum like a beetle. It must have sounded experimental at best. Like a toddler trying to sing before they know the words, but with the intensity of a wild creature. This mimicry wasn't just a game, it was a way of connecting, of belonging. By imitating the sounds of the wild, he was echoing the very essence of his domain. He was learning the grammar of nature's voice. And as he did, he started to notice patterns, rhythms. The steady drip of water in a cave, the repetitive sawing sound of crickets at night, the rhythmic beat of his own heart when he ran or rested. These natural pulses formed the bedrock of his understanding of rhythm. He didn't need a metronome. The world was the metronome, sometimes steady, sometimes chaotic, but always present. His connection to sound was so fundamental that you could argue it was part of his divine nature. While other gods might rule over thunder or the seas, Pan embodied the sound of the wild itself. The sudden, sharp noise that makes you jump, the eerie quiet before a storm, the comforting drone of insects on a summer day, these were his domain as much as the forests and mountains. Historians still argue whether the earliest forms of music in ancient Greece were primarily vocal or instrumental, But for a god so entwined with nature, it's easy to see how sounds derived directly from the environment would be his first instruments. Perhaps he started by tapping rhythms on hollow logs, or blowing across broken reeds, just experimenting with the noises things made. Maybe he scraped rough stones together or rattled dry seed pods. These weren't sophisticated instruments, they were simply the tools the wild offered him. A quirky or fringe tidbit about early music is that many ancient cultures used animal parts, like bone flutes or hide drums, suggesting a deep, practical connection between music making and the natural world Pan inhabited. You can imagine him discovering the resonant quality of a dried gourd, or the percussive potential of striking two pieces of wood together. It was a process of discovery, guided by instinct and the sheer abundance of sonic possibilities in Arcadia. He wasn't trying to impress anyone at this stage. This was just Pan, alone in his element, exploring the sonic landscape, finding ways to add his own voice to the chorus of the wild. It was a deeply personal, almost meditative practice. He was learning not just to make noise, but to shape it, to give it feeling. The sounds he created would reflect the mood of the moment, the joy of a sunny morning, the tension of a predator nearby, the calm of twilight settling over the valleys. As he grew, these experiments became more deliberate. He started to understand that certain sounds could evoke specific feelings, that combining rhythms and tones could create something more complex than simple mimicry. He was developing a sensitivity to the emotional power of sound, long before he thought about using it to charm a nymph. His music was, at first, a conversation with the wilderness, a way for the wild god to express his own wild heart. It was raw, untamed, sometimes beautiful, sometimes unsettling, much like Pan himself. This innate musicality was a fundamental part of who he was. It wasn't a skill he acquired, it was a trait he possessed. And as he watched the nymphs dance, their movements flowing like water and light, a new idea began to take root. He had this power, this connection to the sounds of the world, this burgeoning ability to shape them. Could he use that? Could the music that was so much a part of him, the music born from the very earth they danced upon, be the bridge between his solitary, goat-legged existence and their graceful, elusive world? The sounds he had mastered in the quiet corners of Arcadia suddenly seemed like the most potent tool he possessed. So, Pan is standing there, or perhaps crouched, hidden by the dappled sunlight and thick foliage, thinking about how the sounds he makes could connect him to the wild world he inhabits. And in that world, moving like liquid sunlight through the trees, are the nymphs. You see them too now, if you let your mind drift into the ancient forest. They aren't like the stern, powerful gods of Olympus, demanding sacrifices and commanding thunder. Nymphs are the spirits of place, tied inextricably to the natural features they inhabit. They are the rustle in the leaves, the shimmer on the water, the echo in the mountain cave. Imagine them now, flitting through a sun-dappled clearing. They are often depicted as young, beautiful women, ethereal and luminous, their forms seemingly woven from the elements around them. Some are dryads, bound to specific trees, an ancient oak, a whispering pine. Others are naiads, dwelling in springs, rivers, and lakes, their hair perhaps tangled with water weeds, their skin cool and damp. Still others are oreads, mountain nymphs, agile and swift, at home on rocky slopes and high peaks. This connection to nature isn't just symbolic, it's existential. Their life force is often tied to the health of their domain. If the spring dries up, the naiad might fade. If the tree is cut down, the dryad could perish. It's a beautiful, fragile existence, completely at the mercy of the environment, which gives them a certain vulnerability despite their supernatural nature. And when they gather, they dance. Not like a choreographed performance on a stage, but spontaneously, instinctively, their movements reflecting the rhythms of the wild. Their dances are as fluid as the streams they inhabit, as unpredictable as the wind through the branches. They might circle a particularly ancient tree, their steps light upon the mossy ground, their laughter like the tinkling of water over stones. They might weave through a meadow, their movements mimicking the sway of tall grasses, their arms reaching up like branches towards the sun. It's a dance of pure being, an expression of their connection to the earth, the water, the air. It's the visual equivalent of the natural symphony Pan hears constantly. To Pan, watching from his hidden vantage point, these dances must have seemed utterly mesmerizing. He, with his heavy, cloven hooves, rooted to the earth, capable of bursts of speed but lacking that effortless, flowing grace. He was the spirit of the wild, yes, the raw power and unpredictability. But they were the delicate, beautiful manifestation of its gentle rhythms, the poetry of its movement. Their elusiveness only added to their allure. Try to approach them directly, and they might vanish like mist, merging back into the trees or slipping beneath the surface of a pool. They were part of the wild, yes, but they also seemed to possess a freedom and lightness that Pan, in his sometimes lumbering, earthy form, perhaps envied. Historians still argue whether nymphs were originally distinct minor deities with their own cults, or if they evolved from more generalized animistic beliefs in nature spirits tied to specific locations. Regardless of their exact theological classification, their presence in Greek mythology underscores the deep reverence the ancient Greeks had for the natural world and the belief that every part of it was imbued with a living spirit. It's a mainstream historical fact that nymphs were widely worshipped at local shrines, often simple altars near springs or groves, where people would leave offerings of milk, honey, or flowers to ensure the spirit's goodwill and protect the natural resource. Their dances weren't just entertainment, they were often seen as sacred acts, celebrating the fertility of the land, the abundance of water, the life within the forests. Imagine the scene, moonlight filtering through the leaves, illuminating a clearing, and these luminous figures moving in perfect harmony with the rustling leaves and the chirping crickets. It must have been a sight of profound, wild beauty, a glimpse into the hidden, magical life of Arcadia. For a god like Pan, whose existence was steeped in the sounds and sights of this wilderness, witnessing this graceful expression of its essence would be deeply affecting. It's like watching someone effortlessly perform a skill you've only ever practiced alone in your room, maddeningly beautiful and inspiring. There's a quirky or fringe tidbit about nymphs too. Some myths describe them not just as benign spirits, but as potentially dangerous. They could lead travelers astray with their beauty or their calls, lure mortals to their doom in watery depths, or even drive shepherds mad with their wild cries. So, while they represent grace and beauty, they also embody the unpredictable, sometimes perilous aspect of nature, much like Pan himself. They weren't just pretty faces. They were forces of the wild in their own right, capable of inspiring awe and fear. Pan, watching them, felt the pull. He was the wildness, they were the grace within it. He was the raw sound, they were the visual rhythm. He wanted to bridge that gap. He wanted to be seen by them, not just as the shaggy figure lurking in the shadows, the source of sudden panic, but as something capable of creating beauty, of sharing in their world. He knew he couldn't dance with their lightness. His hooves would break the spell, his form was too heavy. But he had his sounds. He had the music he had learned from the wind, the water, the creatures of Arcadia. The music that was his very language. Could he use that language to speak to them? Could the sounds he made, the melodies he was starting to craft from the raw noise of the world, catch their attention? Could it draw them closer, make them see him differently? He watched the nymphs twirl, their forms a blur of motion and light, and the desire solidified. He wouldn't chase them with clumsy steps, he would call to them with something more subtle, more beautiful. He would use the very essence of the world they danced in, its sounds, to create a bridge to their elusive realm. The stage was being set, not with curtains and spotlights, but with ancient trees, a secluded clearing, and the anticipation of a wild god about to pour his heart out through the only language he truly knew. You're still there, in your mind's eye, hidden in the Arcadian woods, watching Pan watch the nymphs. The air still hums with the sounds of the wild, a symphony that Pan knows intimately. The nymphs continue their dance, a living, breathing part of that symphony, their movements adding a visual rhythm to the rustling leaves and flowing water. They are a blur of light and motion, individual figures merging into a collective expression of nature's vitality. Their grace is almost painful for Pan to witness, a stark contrast to his own earthbound form. He watches them all, his wild heart stirring with a complex mix of awe and longing. He sees their effortless connection to the world he embodies, yet feels a separation from their delicate, elusive company. He sees the way they interact with each other, a community of spirits, and perhaps feels the sting of his own solitary existence. He's the god of the wild, yes, but even a god can feel like an outsider looking in. But then, as his gaze sweeps across the dancing forms, it stops. Fixes on one specific nymph. Her name is Syrinx. And in that moment for Pan, the world narrows. The general allure of the nymphs crystallizes into a singular, overwhelming focus. He sees her. Perhaps it's the way the sunlight catches her hair, turning it to spun gold, or the color of wet earth after a rain. Perhaps it's the particular lightness of her step, the way she seems to barely touch the ground as she moves. Perhaps it's something in her expression, a hint of wildness in her eyes that mirrors his own, or a serene beauty that calms the restless energy within him. Whatever it is, it hits him like a sudden gust of wind through the trees, unexpected, powerful, and completely captivating. Syrinx was a naiad, a nymph of the fresh water, specifically associated with the river Ladon in Arcadia. Unlike many nymphs who might welcome the attention of gods or even mortals, sometimes with disastrous consequences for the latter, Syrinx was known for her chastity and devotion to the goddess Artemis, the virgin huntress. She preferred to roam the forests, hunt, and avoid the company of men, gods, satyrs, or anyone else who might disrupt her peaceful, independent existence. This detail, her deliberate avoidance of romantic entanglement, makes Pan's sudden infatuation all the more poignant, and frankly, a bit inconvenient for her. It's like falling for someone who's clearly marked their social media profile as "Do Not Disturb." Pan, however, isn't exactly known for respecting boundaries when desire takes hold. His wild nature means his impulses are strong, direct, and often overwhelming. He sees Syrinx, sees her beauty, her grace, her connection to the very elements he embodies, and a powerful yearning takes root. It's more than just admiration, it's a sudden, intense desire to possess, to connect, to make her see him, to be with her. His heart, used to the steady rhythms of nature and the occasional panic-inducing jolt, now pounds with a new, unfamiliar beat, the frantic rhythm of infatuation. Imagine the scene from his perspective. The world is a riot of green and brown, dappled light and deep shadow, buzzing insects and rustling leaves. And in the midst of it, this luminous figure moves with an almost supernatural grace. She is part of the landscape, yes, but she also seems to transcend it, a spirit of pure beauty and freedom. To Pan, she must have seemed like the most exquisite note in the entire Arcadian symphony, the one melody he absolutely had to capture. Historians still argue whether the myth of Pan and Syrinx is primarily an ideological tale designed to explain the origin of the panpipes, or if it carries deeper symbolic weight about the relationship between wild nature, Pan, elusive natural beauty, Syrinx, and the art that attempts to capture or transform it. Regardless, the moment Pan spots Syrinx is the pivotal point where his general existence in the wild shifts to a specific, personal narrative driven by desire. There's a quirky or fringe tidbit about naiads like Syrinx. Their fate was often directly tied to the water source they inhabited. If the spring or river dried up, the nymph would die or cease to exist. This gives their existence a fragile, almost vulnerable quality, especially when pursued by powerful figures. It adds a layer of pathos to Syrinx's story. Her very being is rooted in the ephemeral flow of water, making her transformation into reeds by the riverbank a return to, and a literal embodiment of, the natural element she was tied to. It's like her essence was always meant to flow. For Pan, this sudden, intense focus on Syrinx is a departure from his usual mode of being. He is a god of instinct, of raw, untamed nature, but this is something different. This is a specific, personal yearning directed at one individual. It's the moment the general wildness of his domain finds a single, beautiful target for his attention. He watches her move, sees her purity and her avoidance of others, and the challenge, perhaps, only makes her more desirable. He knows instinctively that she won't be easily swayed by his usual methods, the sudden appearance, the rough charm, the sheer force of his presence. She embodies the elusive, gentle side of nature, the part that shies away from the raw power he represents. How could he possibly bridge that gap? How could a creature of hooves and horns, a god associated with sudden fear, possibly approach this graceful, chaste spirit of the water and hope to be seen as anything other than a threat or an unwanted suitor. He couldn't just walk up to her and strike up a conversation, not with those legs, not with his reputation. The thought of trying probably sent a jolt of that familiar panic through himself. It was clear that a direct approach wouldn't work. He needed a different strategy. Something that could speak to her, something that could convey the depth of his feeling, something that could perhaps charm her, or at least make her pause and see him differently. He continues to watch her, his eyes following her every movement. The dancing continues around her, but he barely notices the other nymphs now. All his attention is fixed on Syrinx. He sees her beauty, her independence, her connection to the flowing water and the rustling reeds by the riverbank. And as he watches, the idea solidifies. He cannot reach her with his hands, or his voice and speech, or his clumsy, goat-like dance steps. But he has another language. The language he learned from the wind, the water, the birds, the language of sound, of music. That is his connection to this world, the world she inhabits so gracefully. Maybe, just maybe, that is the bridge he needs. The intensity of his gaze is palpable, a silent promise forming in his wild heart. He will make her notice him. He will use his music. You're still watching him, hidden in the rustling leaves, feeling the intensity of his gaze fixed on the one nymph, Syrinx. Remember how he's the god of the wild, the raw, untamed force of nature. Well, in this moment, that vast, diffuse wildness has found a single, beautiful focus. His desire isn't just a passing fancy. It's taking root, growing with the same unstoppable energy as the vines that twist through the Arcadian forest. Why her? You might wonder. Why this one nymph among the many graceful spirits dancing in the clearing? Syrinx, the naiad devoted to Artemis, the one who shuns company and prefers the solitude of the woods and the banks of her river. Perhaps it was precisely that elusiveness, that fierce independence, that drew him in. Pan is used to being a force of nature, sometimes welcomed, sometimes feared, but always present. But Syrinx existed on her own terms, a wildness within the wild, but on a different frequency than his own sometimes lumbering, goat-legged power. She embodied a kind of purity and grace that was both part of his world and yet seemed slightly apart from its rougher edges. To Pan, she must have felt like the most challenging, and therefore the most desirable, peak to climb, the most elusive stream to follow. He watches her move, and the yearning in his heart deepens. It's more than just physical attraction, though that's surely part of it. She is, after all, described as beautiful. But he also yearns for connection, for recognition. He's the spirit of this place, the source of its wild energy, but he's often a solitary figure, perhaps even a lonely one. The nymphs have their dances, their community, their shared existence tied to the land. Pan, for all his power, exists somewhat outside of that delicate social fabric. He can cause panic, he can protect flocks, he can roam free, but can he truly connect? Especially with someone who embodies the gentle, elusive beauty of the wild, rather than its raw, terrifying power? Syrinx's dedication to Artemis, the virgin goddess of the hunt, was well known. This wasn't a nymph looking for a partner. She was actively avoiding them. Trying to win over someone who has zero interest in being won over? Yeah, that's a challenge even modern dating apps can't solve. For Pan, with his direct, primal nature, this presented a significant obstacle. He couldn't just charm her with witty conversation. His language was the bleating of goats, and the sighing of the wind. He couldn't sweep her off her feet with graceful moves. His hooves were more suited to scrambling over rocks. And simply appearing in a flash of divine power? Given his reputation for causing panic, that would likely send her fleeing instantly, which, let's be honest, would be counterproductive to the whole, impressing her, goal. He needed a way to bridge the gap, to show her a different side of himself, a side that wasn't about sudden fear or raw, overwhelming presence. He needed to stand out, not just as the wild god of the place, but as Pan, someone worthy of her attention, perhaps even her affection. He wasn't just competing with other potential suitors, though ancient myths are full of gods and mortals pursuing nymphs. He was competing with Syrinx's own fierce independence and her devotion to Artemis. He had to offer something unique, something that spoke to the very essence of the world they both inhabited, but from a perspective that was uniquely his own. Historians still argue whether the ancient Greek concept of desire, eros, was always seen as a potentially disruptive force, or if it could also be understood as a drive towards connection and creation, even for figures like Pan. His pursuit of Syrinx, while ultimately leading to her transformation, can be interpreted not just as simple lust, but perhaps as a misguided attempt at profound connection with an aspect of nature he deeply admired but couldn't physically touch or join. He watches her by the riverbank, sees the reeds growing tall and slender, hears the water flowing past. He sees her grace, her purity, her connection to the natural world. And he thinks about his own connection to that world. He is the sounds of Arcadia. He is the wind in the reeds, the gurgle of the stream, the rustle of the leaves. That is his language, his power, his unique offering. It's not a physical strength, not a display of dominance, but an expression of the very soul of the wilderness he shares with her. A quirky or fringe tidbit about ancient Greek thought is the idea that music could literally shape the soul and influence behavior. Philosophers like Plato discussed the ethical power of music, believing certain modes and rhythms could promote virtue or vice. While this might be a more formalized philosophical concept than Pan's wild impulses, it hints at a deep-seated belief that sound had a potent, almost magical, effect on beings. For Pan, perhaps this wasn't philosophical, it was instinctual. He felt the power of sound, its ability to evoke emotion, to create atmosphere, to speak directly to the senses. He realizes that his music, the sounds he has learned to shape from the raw material of Arcadia, is his best chance. It's a way to approach her indirectly, to share something beautiful and authentic about himself without the potential for causing alarm with his physical presence. It's like sending a carefully crafted song instead of just showing up at someone's door unannounced at 3 a.m., definitely not recommended, even for a god. He can pour his yearning, his admiration, his connection to the wild, into melodies. He can make the sounds of the forest and the river speak for him. The desire to impress her, to make her see him differently, solidifies. It's a powerful motivation, driving him towards a course of action that is both deeply personal and intrinsically linked to his divine nature. He won't chase her clumsily through the woods, at least not yet. He will try a different approach. He will use the skill he has honed in solitude, the language he shares with the very elements Syrinx embodies. He will use his music. The decision is made, clear in his wild, focused mind. He will prepare. He will play. And he will make the sounds of Arcadia sing his desire for Syrinx. So there he is, Pan, the god of the wild, the source of panic, the creature of hooves and horns, utterly smitten with a nymph who wants absolutely nothing to do with him. He's watched her dance, seen her elusive grace, her dedication to the huntress goddess Artemis, and the desire to connect, to impress her, has become a burning focus. He knows he can't just rely on his usual divine presence, which tends to make people either worship him nervously or just plain scream and run. With Syrinx, who embodies the gentle, fleeting beauty of nature, that approach would be a guaranteed failure. He couldn't charm her with strength. She was a hunter, swift and agile. He couldn't entice her with earthly goods. Her world was the wild itself. He certainly couldn't dance his way into her heart. His hooves, while excellent for scrambling up mountainsides or kicking unruly satyrs, were not designed for the delicate, flowing steps of a nymph. Imagine trying to waltz with cloven feet. It would be less Fred Astaire, more like a goat trying to navigate an ice rink. Not exactly the picture of romantic grace. He needed something else. Something that could reach her without physically intruding on her space. Something that could speak to her spirit, to her connection with the natural world, in a way his rough exterior couldn't. And that's when he realized the answer wasn't something he had to acquire. It was something he was. It was the very essence of his being, the language he had learned from the wind and the water and the rustling leaves, music. Think back to how Pan spent his early days, not in grand palaces or debating philosophy, but immersed in the raw sounds of Arcadia. He learned the rhythms of the streams, the pitch of the bird song, the drone of the insects. His understanding of sound wasn't academic, it was visceral, instinctual. Music wasn't just an art form for him, it was a fundamental way of interacting with and expressing the wild world. It was his voice when words failed, his connection to the pulse of the earth. He had honed this skill in solitude, not for an audience, but as a conversation with his domain. Now, for the first time, he saw it as a tool for connection, a way to bridge the gap between his wild, sometimes frightening self and the gentle, elusive nymph. Music is intangible. It can fill a space without occupying it, touch the soul without physical contact. It can evoke emotions, paint pictures in the mind, and create a shared atmosphere. For a god whose physical presence could trigger panic, the ability to project his feelings and his nature through something as ethereal as sound was revolutionary. It was his secret weapon, forged not in fire or divine power, but in the quiet corners of the wilderness he called home. He reasoned, in his wild, instinctive way, that music could speak to Syrinx on a deeper level than words or actions. She was a naiad, a spirit of the water, and water has its own music, the gurgle of a stream, the splash of a waterfall, the gentle lapping against the shore. She was tied to the reeds that grew by her river, reeds that whispered in the wind. His music, born from these very sounds, could resonate with her essence, speak to the elements she was made of. It was a language they both understood, even if she didn't know it yet. It was a way for him to say, "I am the wildness you inhabit, but I can also be the beauty within it. See me, not just my hooves and horns, but the soul I pour into these sounds." Historians still argue whether the development of musical instruments in ancient Greece was primarily linked to religious rituals, public performance, or solitary artistic expression. For Pan, it seems to have been a blend of the latter two, starting as personal expression and now intended for a very specific, albeit reluctant, audience of one. His choice of music wasn't just about making noise. It was about crafting a message, a serenade that could bypass her defenses and appeal directly to her connection with the natural world. There's a quirky or fringe tidbit about ancient music theory that suggests certain scales or modes, like the Dorian or Phrygian modes, were believed to evoke specific emotional states or even character traits. While Pan's early music was likely more intuitive and less structured than later Greek theory, it's fascinating to think he might have instinctively gravitated towards sounds and rhythms that he felt embodied his feelings for Syrinx. Perhaps yearning, perhaps a touch of wild melancholy, maybe even a hopeful, bright melody like sunlight on water. He wasn't just going to play anything. He was going to craft a tune, a specific set of sounds, designed to capture her attention and perhaps melt her Artemis-hardened heart. It was like trying to write the perfect algorithm for ancient Greek romance, complex, probably involving reeds, and definitely prone to unexpected outcomes. He saw his musical ability as the most authentic part of himself, a reflection of his deep connection to Arcadia. Unlike the gods on Olympus, who might rely on thunderbolts or divine decrees, Pan's power was rooted in the tangible world around him. His music was the distillation of that world's energy, its beauty, its mystery. By playing for Syrinx, he wasn't just showing off a skill, he was offering her a piece of his soul, wrapped in melodies learned from the wilderness they shared. It was a gamble, certainly. There was no guarantee she would be charmed, or even pause to listen. Her devotion to Artemis and her avoidance of suitors were formidable barriers. But it was the only approach that felt true to him, the only way he could imagine reaching her without causing the very panic his name inspired. The decision solidified in his mind, merging with the growing desire. He would use his music. He would craft the most beautiful, compelling sounds he could, sounds that spoke of the rustling leaves, the flowing water, the wild heart of the mountains. He would make Arcadia sing his yearning, hoping the nymph who was so deeply a part of that world would hear his call and perhaps, just perhaps, turn her gaze towards him with something other than fear or indifference. The stage was set, the player chosen, and the instrument was the very essence of the wild. So, the decision is made. Pan, the god of the wild, has chosen his weapon of charm, music. He's not going to rely on brute force or divine decree. He's going to make Arcadia sing for Syrinx. But this isn't as simple as just whistling a tune. He needs an instrument, and he needs to craft a melody worthy of captivating a nymph dedicated to Artemis, a nymph who actively avoids attention. His first step is to find the materials. And where else would the god of the wild look but to the wild itself? His gaze falls upon the reeds growing along the banks of the river, perhaps even the very river Syrinx calls home. These aren't just plants. They are part of the living fabric of his domain, whispering in the breeze, rooted in the fertile earth, nourished by the flowing water. He knows these reeds intimately. He's heard their hollow rustle, seen how they bend but do not break in the wind. They are slender, strong, and full of potential sound. Carefully, perhaps with surprising gentleness for a creature of his build, he selects several reeds of varying lengths. He snaps them off, or perhaps cuts them cleanly with a sharp stone or even a specially grown divine fingernail. Hey, it's mythology, anything's possible. He examines each one, feeling its weight, testing its hollow core, listening to the faint sound it makes when he taps it. He needs a set of reeds that can produce different pitches, a range of notes that can be combined into a melody. This isn't just about finding random tubes. It's about choosing the right voices from nature's chorus. It's like trying to pick out the perfect set of wine glasses to make musical tones. You need just the right size and thickness for each note, except Pan's materials are a bit more natural. Once he has his collection of reeds, he begins the process of crafting them into pipes. He might trim them to precise lengths, perhaps seal one end of each tube with beeswax or clay, leaving the other open to blow across. He bundles them together, perhaps tying them with sinew or tough plant fibers, arranging them from shortest to longest. This isn't just practical construction, it's an act of creation, taking raw elements from the earth and shaping them into something that can produce organized sound. He's literally building his instrument from the ground up, using the very stuff of Arcadia. It's a hands-on project, definitely not something you can order off Amazon. This process, this selection and shaping of the reeds, is deeply symbolic. He is taking the physical embodiment of the riverbank, of the whispering wind, of the natural world that Syrinx is part of, and transforming it into a tool for expression. He is making the reeds, which are tied to the water and the land, speak his language, express his feelings. It's a beautiful, if ultimately tragic, foreshadowing of Syrinx's own transformation into reeds later in the story. He is, in a way, already trying to possess or transform a piece of her world into his own form of expression. With his newly assembled pipes, the Syrinx, though they won't be called that until later, he begins to practice. He retreats to a secluded spot, a hidden glade or a quiet cave entrance, where he can experiment without being seen or heard by anyone other than the animals and trees. He holds the pipes to his lips, tilting his head, and blows across the open ends. The first sounds are likely hesitant, perhaps a bit reedy, pun intended, maybe even squeaky. It takes skill to produce clear tones by blowing across the edge of a tube. He has to learn the right angle, the right breath pressure for each reed. He starts, as he did in his youth, by mimicking the sounds around him. The clear, pure note of a bird call. The low, resonant drone of a beetle's flight. The sighing of the wind, reproduced by blowing gently across the pipes. But this time, it's not just mimicry, it's refinement. He's not just making noise. He's trying to produce musical tones, notes that have a specific pitch and quality. He tries combining different reeds, moving his lips across the bundled pipes to switch between notes. He's learning to play scales, though perhaps not in the structured Greek modes that would be developed later, but in the natural scales suggested by the pitches of his chosen reeds. His practice sessions are a blend of intense focus and wild experimentation. He might play a simple, repetitive melody, trying to perfect the transitions between notes. He might try faster, more complex passages, attempting to capture the feeling of a rushing stream or a startled deer leaping through the undergrowth. He listens critically, his keen ears, so used to the subtle sounds of the wild, now focused on the sounds he is creating. Does this note sound right? Does this combination of notes convey the feeling he wants? He's not just playing, he's composing, translating his emotions and the essence of Arcadia into sound. Historians still argue whether the earliest wind instruments in the ancient world were primarily used for signaling, ritual, or entertainment. For Pan, it seems to have been a deeply personal form of expression that he now intended to repurpose for connection and courtship. His pipes were likely simpler versions of the later, more sophisticated alloy or syrinx instruments played by humans, but in his hands, crafted from the very heart of the wild, they possessed a unique, raw power. He thinks of syrinx as he plays. He tries to imagine melodies that would make her pause, that would appeal to her connection to the water and the woods. Perhaps a melody that sounds like sunlight dancing on a river surface. Perhaps a tune that evokes the feeling of cool water flowing over smooth stones. Perhaps a rhythm that mirrors the gentle sway of the reeds themselves. He's trying to create music that is both beautiful and meaningful, music that can speak to her without needing words. It's a massive undertaking, especially for someone who usually communicates by either being silently unnerving or shouting loudly enough to cause panic. There's a quirky or fringe tidbit about ancient Greek music that suggests certain instruments were associated with specific gods or aspects of life. The lyre, for instance, was often linked to Apollo and seen as the instrument of order, harmony, and civilization, suitable for performance in cities and at court. The pipes, or aulos, and the syrinx, on the other hand, were often associated with Dionysus and Pan, linked to wilder, more ecstatic, or rustic forms of music, suitable for outdoor settings and less formal gatherings. Pan, by choosing the pipes, is embracing his wild nature, but attempting to use its voice for a refined purpose, courtship. It's like showing up to a fancy dinner party in hiking boots, but hoping your singing will make everyone forget your footwear. He practices tirelessly, driven by his growing desire for syrinx. The sounds he produces fill the secluded glade, echoing off the trees and rocks. The birds might pause their singing to listen, the deer might lift their heads, their ears twitching. Even the wind seems to slow, as if paying attention to this new voice in its ancient chorus. He's not just practicing notes, he's practicing emotion. He's trying to infuse the sound of the reeds with his yearning, his admiration, his hope. He wants the music to be so compelling, so beautiful, so intrinsically linked to the world she loves, that she cannot ignore it. He spends days, perhaps even weeks, refining his technique, experimenting with different melodies, listening to how the sounds carry through the air. He learns which reeds work best together, which combinations of notes evoke the feelings he wants to convey. He is a god, yes, with innate talent, but this is a craft, and like any craft, it requires dedication and practice. He is pouring his wild heart into these hollow tubes, preparing to offer his most authentic self through the medium of sound. The moment of performance is approaching, and he wants to be ready. He wants the music to be perfect. He wants it to win her over. So, Pan has his pipes crafted from the heart of the wild, and he's been practicing, pouring his yearning into the reeds. He's ready. Ready to stop practicing in secluded glades and start playing for an audience of one. But where do you stage a performance for a nymph who wants nothing to do with you, especially when your mere appearance can cause a stampede? You don't book the local amphitheater. You find a spot that's as wild and elusive as the nymph herself. He needed the perfect stage, one that would complement his music and perhaps make her feel safe enough to linger, just for a moment. His search for this ideal location isn't like scouting for real estate. It's an intuitive journey through the landscape he knows better than anyone. He walks, or perhaps Lopez, with those goat legs through the forests, climbs rocky slopes, follows the winding paths of streams. He's looking for a place that feels right, a place where the air is still and resonant, where the natural beauty is breathtaking, and where there's a sense of hidden magic. He needs somewhere secluded, away from the usual haunts of shepherds or travelers, a place where he can remain partially concealed while his music does the work. He considers many spots. A high mountain peak? Too exposed, the wind would carry the sound away haphazardly, and it's not really Syrinx's domain, tied as she is to water. A deep, dark cave? Too intimidating, might trigger that panic response he's trying to avoid. A wide, open meadow? Too little cover. He needs somewhere that feels like a secret, a natural sanctuary. And then he finds it. Perhaps it's a small clearing deep within the woods, bordered by ancient, moss-covered trees whose leaves create a soft, rustling canopy overhead. Or maybe it's a bend in the river, the water flowing gently over smooth stones, with a thicket of reeds along the bank, perhaps even the very reeds he used for his pipes, bringing a whole new level of meta to this performance. There's a large, smooth rock or a fallen log where he can sit, partially hidden by ferns or low-hanging branches. The sunlight filters through the leaves in shifting patterns, creating a dappled, magical light on the forest floor. You can almost feel the cool, damp earth beneath your feet, smell the rich scent of pine needles and decaying leaves, hear the gentle murmur of the nearby water and the distant buzz of insects. This spot isn't just geographically suitable, it feels sacred. In the ancient world, certain places in nature were considered imbued with divine presence: groves, springs, mountaintops. These weren't built temples, but natural shrines, where the veil between the mortal and divine world felt thinner. This chosen location for Pan's serenade is one such place, a natural cathedral crafted by time and the elements. It feels peaceful, yet alive with unseen energy. It's the kind of place where you might expect to see a nymph dancing, or hear the whisper of a god on the wind. He settles into his chosen spot, positioning himself so that he has a clear view of the area where Syrinx might appear, but also with enough cover that he's not immediately obvious. He checks his pipes, running his fingers over the reeds, testing their weight and balance. He takes a deep breath, filling his lungs with the clean, wild air of Arcadia. He listens to the ambient sounds of the location, the gentle flow of the water, the chirping of unseen birds, the rustle of leaves. He wants his music to emerge from this soundscape, to be a part of it, not a jarring intrusion. It needs to sound like the voice of the place itself, speaking in a new way. Why this emphasis on the location? Because for a being like a nymph, whose very existence is tied to a specific natural feature, the environment is everything. Syrinx wouldn't be impressed by gold or palaces. Her world is the river, the reeds, the forest. By choosing a location that embodies the beauty and tranquility of Arcadia, Pan is showing respect for her world, creating a context where his music can be heard not as a demand or a threat, but as an offering from the heart of the shared wilderness. It's like trying to impress a master chef by cooking a meal using ingredients you foraged yourself from their favorite local spot. You're speaking their language, literally, through the elements. Historians still argue whether the concept of sacred space in ancient Greece was primarily defined by human ritual and construction, like temples and altars, or if certain natural locations were inherently considered sacred regardless of human activity. For Pan, a god of the wild, it's clear his sacred spaces are the latter, places where the divine energy of nature is palpable. He waits. Patience isn't always a virtue associated with Pan, known for sudden impulses and bursts of energy. But here, driven by his desire for Syrinx, he waits, still and quiet, merging with the shadows and the foliage. He knows nymphs often follow predictable paths. To a favorite spring, a sun-dappled clearing for dancing, the banks of their river. He has chosen his spot based on his knowledge of Syrinx's likely movements, hoping she will pass nearby, drawn perhaps by the beauty of the location itself, unaware of the performance awaiting her. It's a calculated risk, a blend of instinct and strategy. There's a quirky or fringe tidbit that some ancient Greek sources suggest that Pan could influence the paths of animals and even people in the wild, sometimes leading them astray, hence panic, but perhaps also guiding them towards certain locations. Could Pan have subtly influenced Syrinx's route that day, drawing her towards his chosen stage? It's a fascinating thought, adding another layer to his pursuit. Was it purely chance, or did he exert a subtle, divine pull? We don't know for sure, but it fits his nature as a god who messes with mortals and nymphs alike. As he waits, the anticipation builds. He holds the pipes loosely in his hands, his goat legs tucked beneath him, his keen eyes scanning the edge of the clearing. The air feels charged, not with the energy of impending panic, but with a different kind of tension, the quiet hum of expectation. He's about to put himself out there, not with a display of power, but with vulnerability, offering the most beautiful thing he possesses. It's a risky move for a god known more for causing fear than inspiring affection. He imagines her reaction. Will she stop? Will she be charmed? Will she recognize the sounds of her own world woven into his melodies? Or will she simply hear the music of a wild god and flee? The uncertainty is palpable, even for a deity. He's not just trying to impress her. He's trying to connect with her on a level that transcends his fearsome reputation and her elusive nature. The location is perfect, the pipes are ready, the musician is poised. All that's missing is the audience. He listens, straining his ears above the natural sounds of the forest. And then, he hears it, the faint rustle of leaves, the light tread of feet on the forest floor. She is coming. Unaware, graceful, moving towards the hidden stage where a wild god waits, ready to pour his heart out through a bundle of reeds. The moment is here. You are still there, perched invisibly among the trees near Pan's chosen spot, feeling the quiet tension in the air. He is hidden, pipes ready, heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and wild hope. He's been waiting, patiently for him, listening to the sounds of the forest, and then he heard it, the light, unmistakable footsteps of a nymph. Now you hear it too. Faint at first, a soft rustle of leaves, the snap of a tiny twig, growing steadily louder, closer. It's Syrinx. She is approaching, unaware of the wild god waiting, poised to serenade her. Imagine her now, moving through the dappled light. She's not sneaking or hiding, she's simply going about her day, perhaps heading towards her favorite part of the river, or seeking a quiet glade to rest in after a hunt. She moves with that inherent nymph grace you saw earlier, her steps light, almost floating over the forest floor. She might be humming softly to herself, or listening to the birdsong, completely immersed in the natural world that is her home. Her senses are sharp. As a follower of Artemis, she's attuned to the sounds and scents of the wilderness. But she isn't expecting danger here, not in this peaceful corner of Arcadia. She knows Pan roams these woods, of course. Everyone does. But she successfully avoided his attention, and the attention of others like him, for a long time. She feels safe, perhaps even complacent, in her familiar domain. The path she follows winds through the trees, leading her closer and closer to the secluded spot Pan has chosen. You can feel the tension building with every step she takes. It's like watching a scene unfold in slow motion, knowing what's about to happen but unable to intervene. You see her pass by a particularly ancient oak, its bark rough and furrowed, a tree that might even be home to a dryad nymph, her cousin perhaps. You see her push aside a low-hanging branch, revealing her face for a moment, serene, focused on her path, utterly unaware of the wild eyes watching her from the nearby thicket. She might pause for a moment, perhaps to admire a cluster of wildflowers growing by the path, or to listen to the distant call of a cuckoo. These brief pauses, these moments of quiet appreciation for the beauty of her world, only heighten the anticipation. Will she stop? Will she change direction? No, her path seems set, leading her directly towards the bend in the river, towards the reeds, towards Pan. It's almost agonizing to witness her innocent progression towards the inevitable encounter. You might want to call out, to warn her, but you know you can't. This is a moment set in myth, a story playing out as it must. Historians still argue whether ancient Greek myths were primarily intended as religious doctrine, moral lessons, or simply forms of entertainment and explanation for natural phenomena. In this moment, watching Syrinx approach, the myth feels like a poignant, perhaps even tragic, narrative about vulnerability and the unavoidable collision of different forces within the natural world. As she gets closer, you start to notice smaller details about her. The way her simple tunic is perhaps woven from plant fibers, the intricate pattern of leaves embroidered along the hem. The light caught in her hair, the gentle swing of her arms as she walks. She is the embodiment of the grace and delicate beauty of Arcadia, moving through the landscape like a living part of it. And you know that the creature waiting to play music for her embodies its rougher, wilder, more unpredictable aspects. The contrast is stark, and it makes the approaching encounter feel even more charged. She nears the edge of the clearing where Pan is hidden. The air here is cooler, perhaps, due to the proximity of the river. The sounds are dominated by the gentle murmur of the water and the soft rustling of the reeds. This is her territory, familiar and comforting. she feels at home here, safe. And that sense of safety is about to be challenged. It's like walking into your favorite quiet coffee shop, settling in with a book, and not realizing there's a full rock band setting up behind you for a surprise concert. Not exactly the peaceful afternoon you were expecting. Pan, from his hiding spot, watches her approach, his heart hammering against his ribs. He sees her innocence, her unawareness, and perhaps a flicker of doubt crosses his wild mind. Is this really the right way? To surprise her like this? But the desire is too strong, the plan is set. He believes his music is the key, the bridge. He has to try. He tightens his grip on the pipes, his hooves shifting slightly on the forest floor. He has to resist the urge to reveal himself too soon, to call out to her. The music must be the first thing she hears from him, not the sight of his goat legs or the sound of his rough voice. There's a quirky or fringe tidbit that some ancient sources suggest nymphs could sense the presence of divine beings or powerful spirits, sometimes causing them to flee even before the being was revealed. The fact that Syrinx is approaching seemingly unaware might suggest Pan is using some subtle divine ability to mask his presence, or perhaps her focus on her surroundings and sense of safety in her familiar territory is making her less vigilant than usual. Or maybe, just maybe, she feels a strange pull towards the spot, an inexplicable urge to go that way today, a subtle influence from the god waiting there. She is now just yards away from the edge of the thicket where Pan is concealed. You can almost hear her soft breathing, the gentle swish of her clothing against the undergrowth. She might glance towards the river, anticipating the cool water, or look up at the sky, checking the position of the sun. Every movement is natural, unforced. She has no idea that her simple walk through the woods is about to become the prelude to one of the most famous origin stories in Greek mythology. Historians still argue whether the portrayal of nymphs in Greek myths evolved over time, from wild, untamed spirits to more domesticated or romanticized figures. Syrinx, with her devotion to Artemis and her avoidance of male company, represents a particular type of nymph, independent and elusive, embodying the wildness that resists being captured or tamed. This makes Pan's attempt to win her over, especially through a means as potentially captivating as music, a significant challenge to her nature. She reaches the very edge of the clearing, the sunlight falling fully upon her now. She might pause here for a moment, taking in the peaceful scene, the gentle flow of the river, the tall reeds swaying in the breeze, the quiet beauty of the secluded spot. She is framed by the ancient trees and the dappled light, a vision of natural grace. And Pan is watching her, holding his breath, his fingers poised over the pipes. The moment is perfectly set. She is unaware, beautiful, and within earshot. He has his instrument, his carefully crafted melodies, his burning desire. The stage is ready. The audience of one is here. The musician is about to begin. The silence stretches, filled only by the sounds of the natural world, the sounds that are about to be joined, and transformed, by Pan's serenade. She is there now, just yards away, a figure of light and grace against the backdrop of the ancient woods. You can almost hear the soft intake of her breath, the gentle rustle of her tunic as she pauses, perhaps drawn by the subtle peace of the spot, or maybe feeling an inexplicable pull she doesn't understand. Pan, hidden and silent, watches her, his wild heart hammering. His goat legs are still, his human upper body tense with anticipation. His eyes, usually reflecting the chaotic energy of the wild, are focused intently on her. He holds the pipes, the bundle of reeds he painstakingly crafted, his fingers poised over the openings. This is it. The moment he has prepared for. The moment he will try to bridge the gap between his world and hers, not with clumsy advances or fear-inducing appearances, but with the language he knows best, the music of Arcadia. He takes another deep breath, slow and steady, filling his lungs with the scent of pine and damp earth. He raises the pipes to his lips, his gaze still fixed on Syrinx. He knows the first note is crucial. It has to be gentle, inviting, not startling. It has to sound like it belongs here, like another voice in the natural chorus, but one that stands out, that calls to her. He blows softly across the open end of one of the reeds. And the sound emerges. It's not the triumphant blast of a trumpet, or the rich resonance of a lyre played in a temple courtyard. It's something wilder, more earthy, more reedy. A clear, pure note, perhaps a little breathy, like the wind sighing through tall grass, but with a distinct pitch. It hangs in the air for a moment, a single thread of sound woven into the existing tapestry of the forest. The gurgle of the river, the distant buzz of a bee, the rustle of leaves. It's a sound that belongs to this place, born from its very substance, but shaped by intention. He blows a second note, then a third, moving his lips across the different lengths of reeds bundled together. He's playing the melody he practiced, the one he crafted to speak of sunlight on water, of the gentle sway of reeds, of the quiet yearning in his heart. The notes aren't perfectly smooth or technically flawless. This is rustic music, played by a wild god on handmade pipes, but they are full of feeling. They carry the scent of the earth, the coolness of the river, the warmth of the sun filtering through the leaves. He doesn't start loud or fast. He begins gently, tentatively, like a shy bird offering its first song of the morning. The melody is simple at first, repetitive, almost hypnotic, designed to catch the ear without demanding attention, to invite curiosity rather than trigger alarm. It's a sound that might make you pause on a walk, tilting your head, wondering, "What was that?" From your hidden vantage point you watch Syrinx. At the first note, her head snaps up. Her body tenses, her eyes darting around, trying to locate the source of the sound. Is it a new kind of bird call? The wind? She's a creature of the wild, used to interpreting its sounds, but this is something new, something deliberate, yet blending strangely with the environment. She doesn't immediately flee. The sound isn't threatening. It's interesting. It's beautiful in a wild, untamed way. Like a raw gem found in the dirt. Pan continues to play, gaining confidence with each note. His fingers, perhaps less nimble than a human musician's, move across the pipes, finding the pitches. His breath controls the volume and tone. He's pouring his intention into the music, his admiration for her, his connection to the world she loves, his desperate hope that she will see him, truly see him, through these sounds. He tries to make the music evoke the beauty of the river she calls home, the rustling of the reeds that are so much a part of her world. Historians still argue whether the ancient Greek syrinx, the panpipes, was primarily a solo instrument, or often played alongside other instruments like the aulos, a double-reed pipe. For Pan, in this moment, it is a solo performance, his voice alone speaking through the reeds, a direct communication from his heart to hers. The melody starts to weave a spell in the clearing. The birdsong seems to quieten, as if listening. The leaves rustle less insistently. The very air seems to vibrate with the sound. It's a sound that is both ancient and new, born from the oldest materials, but shaped by a divine will. It feels organic, like the sound of the earth breathing. It's not music for dancing in a city square. It's music for forests and rivers, for hidden glades and mountain slopes. It is the sound of Pan. There's a quirky or fringe tidbit that some ancient musical traditions believed certain instruments possessed spirits, or were imbued with magical properties. For Pan, whose pipes were literally made from the living stuff of the wild, it's easy to imagine him believing the reeds themselves held a spirit, a voice he was simply coaxing out and shaping. It adds a layer of inherent wild magic to the sound he produces. He watches Syrinx from his hiding spot, gauging her reaction. She is still standing, listening. She hasn't run. This is a victory, however small. He sees her curiosity, the way her head is tilted, her expression thoughtful. He plays on, trying to make the music more compelling, adding variations, exploring the range of his pipes. He tries to inject warmth, perhaps a touch of melancholy yearning, into the notes. He's not just playing a tune, he's telling a story, his story through sound. He knows he can't reveal himself yet. The music must draw her in, make her feel safe, or at least intrigued. His physical appearance is still his biggest obstacle. So he remains hidden, a creature of the shadows pouring his heart out through the voice of the reeds. It's like trying to woo someone by sending them anonymous poetry. The words might be beautiful, but the lack of a visible source adds a layer of mystery, and perhaps, for a cautious soul like Syrinx, a touch of unease. Will she be charmed by the music, or wary of its unseen origin? He continues to play, the melody flowing now, more confident, more expressive. He's lost in the music, in the act of creation, and in the intensity of his desire for the nymph standing just outside his hidden circle. The sounds fill the air, a wild serenade in a secluded corner of Arcadia, intended for one listener. You can feel the raw emotion in the notes, the hope and the longing of the wild god. He has laid bare his soul, not with words, but with the voice of the wilderness itself. The music is beautiful, captivating, and utterly his. The question is, will it be enough? Will it convince the elusive nymph, devoted to Artemis and wary of all suitors, to stay and listen? The melody continues to pour from his pipes, a desperate, beautiful plea hanging in the sun-dappled air. She is standing there, still bathed in the dappled sunlight of the clearing, her head tilted, listening. Pan's music fills the air, a wild, reedy sound born from the very landscape she inhabits. He is pouring his heart out through the pipes, trying to weave a spell of charm, to make her see him differently, to draw her closer with the beauty of the sounds he creates. He watches her intently from his hiding spot, anticipation thick in the air. He expects her to be captivated, perhaps to move closer, intrigued by this new, beautiful voice in her world. But her reaction isn't what he hoped for. Instead of looking charmed or drawn in, Syrinx stiffens. Her initial curiosity gives way to something else. Her eyes, which had been scanning the trees, narrow slightly. Her body language shifts. She doesn't move forward, she takes a subtle step back. Her head isn't tilted in appreciation anymore. It's held alertly, like a deer that has caught the scent of something unfamiliar and potentially dangerous. The serenity that was on her face just moments ago is replaced by a look of wariness, even a flicker of unease. The music is beautiful, yes, but it's also wild. It has the raw, untamed quality of Pan himself, the very quality that makes him the source of panic. And while the sound itself isn't inherently terrifying, the source is unknown, hidden. It's coming from the thicket, from the shadows where Pan is concealed. For a nymph devoted to Artemis, the huntress, who values her independence and actively avoids male attention, an unseen presence playing compelling music isn't romantic. It's suspicious. It feels like a trap. Imagine you're walking through a beautiful park, enjoying the peace and quiet, when suddenly you hear incredibly beautiful music. But you can't see the musician, and the music seems to be coming from behind a dense bush where you know someone is hiding. Even if the music is lovely, the situation itself is unnerving. You're not thinking, "Wow, what a talented mystery person. I must investigate." You're thinking, "Okay, this is weird. And maybe creepy. I should probably get out of here." That's the kind of reaction Pan's serenade is triggering in Syrinx. His music, intended to be a bridge, is instead acting as a warning signal. It is too potent, too wild, too obviously emanating from a hidden, powerful source. It speaks of the wilderness, yes, but it also speaks of the god who embodies its untamed, unpredictable, sometimes terrifying aspects. It's the sound of Pan, and for Syrinx, that sound, even when shaped into melody, carries the potential for threat. Pan, watching her, feels a jolt of disappointment, perhaps even a touch of that familiar panic ripple through his own chest. This wasn't supposed to happen. The music was supposed to charm her, to make her curious, to draw her closer. He poured his desire and his connection to their shared world into those notes. Why isn't she captivated? Why does she look scared? He doesn't understand her reaction. He doesn't fully grasp that his music, born from his wild soul, carries the imprint of his whole being, hooves, horns, and the capacity for sudden, overwhelming presence. He thought the music would transcend his physical form and his reputation, speaking only of beauty and yearning. But for Syrinx, the music is inextricably linked to the unseen musician, and that musician is Pan, the god she has spent her life avoiding. Historians still argue whether the ancient Greeks viewed Pan primarily as a benevolent protector of shepherds and flocks, or as a more ambiguous, potentially dangerous force of the wild. Syrinx's reaction here leans towards the latter interpretation. Despite the beauty of his music, his underlying nature, or at least the perception of it, overrides the charm. She takes another step back, her weight shifting, ready to turn and flee. The initial fascination is gone, replaced by a clear desire to distance herself from the unseen source of this powerful, unsettling sound. She glances towards the river, towards the open spaces that offer escape, away from the shadows where the music originates. The gentle melody, intended to be a sweet serenade, is becoming the soundtrack to her growing alarm. This unexpected reaction is a crucial turning point. Pan's carefully planned, vulnerable attempt at courtship is failing. His music is not drawing her in, it is pushing her away. His greatest strength, his ability to embody and express the sounds of the wild, is being perceived as a threat by the very nymph who lives within that wildness. It's like trying to win someone over with a gift they are instinctively afraid of, like giving a bird a beautiful cage. The intention might be misguided affection, but the outcome is fear and a desperate desire for freedom. There's a quirky or fringe tidbit that some ancient myths portray Pan as having a particularly strong, almost animalistic, sexual drive, which made his pursuits of nymphs often frightening and forceful rather than romantic. While this myth focuses on music as his tool, Syrinx's instinctive fear might stem from a deeper, mythological understanding of Pan's relentless and often unwelcome desires, regardless of the method he employs. Her reaction isn't just to the music, it's to the god she senses behind it, a god whose pursuits are rarely gentle or easily deflected. Pan sees her preparing to flee. The sight of her turning away, her grace now tinged with fear, ignites a different kind of wildness within him. The yearning doesn't disappear, but it twists, curdling into a desperate impulse to prevent her escape. His carefully constructed plan, his vulnerable offering of music, has failed. The bridge he tried to build with sound is collapsing. And in that moment, the wild god reverts to his more primal nature. The smooth rock, the rustling leaves, the gentle river, the idyllic setting he chose for his serenade, suddenly feel charged with a different energy. The music falters, perhaps a note sharpens, a rhythm becomes erratic, reflecting the shift in Pan's mood from hopeful serenader to desperate pursuer. He can't let her go. Not after all this. Not after finding her, watching her, crafting his pipes, practicing his melodies, waiting in this secluded spot. The disappointment of her reaction is instantly overshadowed by the overwhelming, instinctual drive to possess what he desires. The elegant plan involving music is abandoned in a flash of wild impulse. If the music won't keep her, something else will have to. His hooves shift on the earth, no longer poised delicately, but digging in, ready for movement. His eyes lose their hopeful softness and regain the sharp, predatory focus of the hunter. The nymph, who embodies the elusive beauty of the wild, is about to discover that the god of the wild, when thwarted, can be just as relentless and terrifying as any predator. The serenade is over. The chase is about to begin. She is turning. You see it, the subtle shift in her weight, the way her eyes flick towards the open space by the river. Pan's music, his vulnerable offering, has failed to charm her. Instead, it has triggered her deepest instinct, flight. The beautiful, reedy melody, meant to be a bridge, has become the sound of pursuit, even before the physical chase begins. The air, moments ago filled with the hopeful harmony of pipes and nature, now feels charged with tension, with the primal energy of predator and prey. Pan, watching her, feels that shift too. The disappointment is sharp, like a thorn pricking his wild heart, but it's instantly overwhelmed by a more ancient, powerful urge. He cannot let her escape. Not now. Not after he's found her, desired her, tried to reach her. The carefully constructed plan of musical seduction collapses in an instant. His instinct takes over, the raw, untamed nature that defines him. He is the god of the wild, and in the wild, when something is desired and it flees, you pursue. He explodes from his hiding spot. Not with the graceful leap of a deer, but with the sudden, powerful burst of energy characteristic of a wild goat startled from its rest. His hooves scrabble on the earth, kicking up leaves and dirt. His pipes, forgotten for a moment, might clatter or swing wildly. The surprise of his sudden appearance, even after the music has alerted her to a hidden presence, is still potent. You feel a jolt yourself, watching him emerge, his bearded face set in a look of fierce determination, his goat legs propelling him forward. Syrinx sees him then. The source of the music, the wild god whose name is synonymous with panic. The sight of his half-human, half-animal form, the horns, the hooves, confirms her fears. This isn't a gentle spirit offering a serenade. This is the untamed power of the wilderness made manifest, and it is coming towards her. Her hesitation vanishes. There is only one thought now: escape. And she runs. You watch the chase unfold through the ancient woods, a primal drama playing out against a backdrop of timeless beauty. Syrinx, the naiad, is swift and light-footed, her movements fluid and graceful as she darts between trees, her form a blur of motion. She knows this terrain intimately, the tricky routes, the slippery moss, the best paths to take. She runs like the wind, like the water she is tied to, her body moving with the effortless speed of a creature born to the wild. She is the elusive spirit of the forest, and she is fleeing for her life, or at least her freedom. Pan pursues her, his powerful goat legs carrying him over the uneven ground with surprising speed. He may lack her effortless grace, his hooves making more noise on the forest floor, but he is strong, relentless, and driven by a singular focus. He crashes through undergrowth, leaps over fallen logs, scrambles up rocky inclines that would stop a mortal dead in their tracks. He is the embodiment of the wild pursuit, the hunter chasing the desired prey. His breath comes in ragged gasps, the sounds mixing with the rustling leaves and the distant murmur of the river. The chase is a frantic dance through the heart of Arcadia. You hear the pounding of their feet. Syrinx is light and rapid, Pan's heavier and more powerful. You see the flash of her tunic, the darker shape of Pan gaining on her. The air is filled with the sounds of the pursuit, the snapping twigs, the tearing leaves, the strained breathing, maybe even a wild cry from Pan urging her to stop, or a desperate gasp from Syrinx as she pushes herself faster. Historians still argue whether depictions of divine pursuits in Greek mythology were meant to symbolize the overwhelming power of gods over mortals/nymphs, or if they reflected actual social anxieties about unwelcome advances in ancient society. In this case, watching Syrinx flee from Pan, it certainly feels like a terrifying manifestation of being pursued by a force far greater and wilder than yourself. Syrinx tries every trick she knows. She might weave through the densest parts of the forest, hoping to tangle his larger form. She might leap across a narrow stream, knowing he'll have to find a way over. She uses her knowledge of the land, her connection to the wild, to try and outwit him. But Pan knows this land just as well, if not better. He is its god. He anticipates her moves, finds the quickest routes, uses his strength to overcome obstacles that slow her down. It's a desperate game of chase, played out on nature's stage. Remember that quirky tidbit about nymphs being potentially dangerous, able to lead travelers astray? Syrinx isn't trying to lead Pan astray in a malicious way now, she's just trying to get astray from him. Her goal is simply distance, safety, escape back to the familiar embrace of her river. The chase is relentless. Pan is gaining on her. You can see the fear etched on Syrinx's face, the desperate strain in her movements. The initial beauty of the setting, the sun-dappled clearing, the gentle riverbank, is forgotten, replaced by the raw tension of the pursuit. The music Pan played earlier, meant to be a serenade, now feels ironic, a cruel contrast to the frantic sounds of the chase. It's like trying to woo someone with a mixtape and then immediately tackling them when they don't look impressed. Definitely not a recommended dating strategy. She is running towards the river, her home, her sanctuary. She knows she can't outrun him forever on land. Her hope lies in the water, in the reeds that grow along the banks, in the element she is tied to. She pushes herself harder, her lungs burning, the gap between her and Pan closing with terrifying speed. He is close enough now that she can hear his heavy breathing right behind her, the thud of his hooves on the ground. Panic, the very emotion he inspires, is gripping her now in its purest form. There's a quirky or fringe tidbit that suggests Pan's hooves were said to leave burning imprints on the earth, or that his presence could cause plants to wither or bloom unnaturally. While we don't see that explicitly here, the intensity of his pursuit certainly feels like it's leaving an impact on the very landscape they tear through, stirring up the quiet peace of the forest. She reaches the riverbank. The water flows cool and inviting, the reeds stand tall and dense. Safety seems so close, yet Pan is right behind her. She can't dive into the water. He's too close, he might catch her before she can escape into the current. She is trapped between the relentless god and the protective but not instantly accessible river. It's a moment of absolute desperation. She has nowhere left to run. Pan is almost upon her. You can almost feel the heat of his pursuit, the terrifying inevitability of the moment. She stands at the edge of the water, the reeds swaying gently in the breeze, a stark contrast to the frantic energy of the chase. Her eyes are wide with fear, fixed on the god bearing down on her. She has one last hope, one last desperate plea. And it is directed not to Pan, but to the elements themselves, to the river, to the very nature she embodies. The chase is over. The moment of transformation, of escape through a different kind of merging with the wild, is at hand. She is there, on the edge of the river, the cool water almost touching her feet, the tall reeds swaying like silent witnesses. Pan is right behind her, his heavy breathing, the thud of his hooves, terrifyingly close. There's nowhere left to run on solid ground. This is the end of the chase, the moment of capture. But Syrinx isn't looking at Pan. Her wide, fearful eyes are fixed on the water, on the reeds, on the elements that are her essence. She is a naiad, a spirit of the river, tied to this place, these flowing currents, these growing things. In this moment of ultimate desperation, she doesn't cry out to a distant god on Olympus, or plead with her pursuer. Her plea is to the nature she embodies, to the river god Laden, her father in some tellings, or simply to the wild world itself to save her, to take her back into its embrace, to make her one with the elements she belongs to. She whispers, or perhaps screams silently in her heart, for transformation, for escape through becoming something else entirely. And nature answers. You watch, transfixed, as the impossible happens. As Pan lunges forward, almost close enough to touch her, Syrinx's form begins to change. It's not a slow, shimmering fade like mist, it's a rapid, urgent metamorphosis, driven by the raw power of her plea and the ancient magic of the wild. Her soft skin hardens, becoming green and reedy. Her limbs lengthen and thin, fusing together into hollow stalks. Her hair, moments ago flowing in the wind, transforms into feathery tassels atop the growing tubes. Her feet, poised to leap into the water, root themselves into the muddy bank, becoming indistinguishable from the other reeds growing there. In the space of a breath, the graceful, fleeing nymph is gone, replaced by a cluster of simple river reeds, swaying gently in the breeze at the water's edge. They look like any other reeds, green and hollow, bending towards the river's flow. But you know, and Pan knows, that these are different. These are Syrinx. Her essence, her spirit, has flowed into these plant forms, a desperate, final escape from the god who pursued her. It's like she hit the ultimate escape button, but instead of logging off, she turned into part of the scenery. Talk about commitment to avoiding someone. Pan arrives at the river bank, his powerful momentum carrying him to the very spot where Syrinx stood. But there is only the water, and the reeds, bending and whispering in the wind. He stops abruptly, his hooves skidding slightly on the damp earth. His eyes, moments ago filled with the fierce focus of the chase, now widen in surprise, then confusion, then perhaps a dawning, terrible understanding. He sees the reeds, so similar to the others, yet he knows, with the certainty of a god of this place, that these are her. He was so close, so certain of capturing her, and in the very last second, she slipped through his fingers by becoming the wild itself. His initial reaction might be frustration, the thwarted desire burning within him. But as he stands there, catching his breath, listening to the sounds of the riverbank, his wild heart is struck by something else. The wind sighs through the newly formed reeds, creating a soft, melancholic sound, a reedy whisper that seems to carry a hint of her voice, an echo of her plea, or perhaps just the sad song of her transformation. It's the sound of the wild, yes, but imbued with loss, with yearning, with the presence of the nymph who is now part of the riverbank. Historians still argue whether the myth of Pan and Syrinx is primarily an etiological tale, meaning a story created to explain the origin of something, in this case, the panpipes, or if it holds deeper symbolic meaning about the relationship between gods, nature, and the limits of pursuit. Her transformation into reeds, the very material of the pipes, certainly serves as a powerful origin story for the instrument. Pan reaches out, not to grasp her, but to touch the reeds. His large, rough hand, used to grasping staffs or wrestling with satyrs, is surprisingly gentle as he runs his fingers over the smooth, green stalks that were moments ago syrinx. He feels their hollow structure, hears the soft sighing sound they make in the breeze. He cut reeds like these before, remember? When he was preparing to serenade her, to use their natural sound to charm her. Now, the reeds are her, or contain her essence. The instrument he planned to use to woo her has become the physical manifestation of her escape from him. It's a twist of fate that's almost unbearably poignant. A quirky or fringe tidbit about ancient beliefs in metamorphosis is that transformations were often seen not just as physical changes, but as shifts in being, sometimes a punishment, sometimes a salvation, but always a permanent altering of identity and form. Syrinx's transformation is clearly presented as a salvation, a desperate act to preserve her freedom, even at the cost of her human-like form. Standing there, surrounded by the sounds of the river and the rustling reeds, Pan feels a complex mix of emotions. The desire is still there, but it's now mingled with grief, with loss, with a strange kind of reverence for the absolute nature of her escape. He couldn't possess her, but he can still connect with her, or at least with her transformed essence, through the very thing he tried to use to reach her in the first place: sound. He takes out the sharp stone he might have used before, or perhaps simply snaps the reeds with surprising care. He cuts several stalks of varying lengths from the cluster that was syrinx. He holds them in his hands, feeling their connection to her, hearing the wind sigh through them like her breath. He remembers the pipes he made earlier, the practice sessions, the melodies he composed for her. Now he will make new pipes, pipes that are literally made from the nymph he desired and lost. He trims them, seals the ends, and binds them together, creating the instrument that will forever bear her name. The syrinx. The panpipes. It is a direct, physical link to his failed pursuit and her successful escape. Every time he plays them, he will be calling out to her, playing on her transformed body. It's both beautiful and incredibly sad, a musical monument to a chase that ended not in capture, but in a different kind of merging with nature. He raises the newly formed pipes to his lips. The first notes he plays are not the hopeful, charming melodies he practiced before. They are mournful, melancholic, filled with the sound of the wind sighing through the reeds, the gurgle of the river flowing past, and the deep, wild sorrow in his heart. It is the sound of yearning, of loss, of the beauty that remains even after the desired object has become unattainable in the way he intended. The music is still wild, still earthy, but it now carries a profound sense of melancholy, a bittersweet quality that will forever define the sound of the panpipes. It is Pan's music, yes, but it is also Syrinx's voice, echoing through the reeds, a permanent part of the Arcadian soundscape, a reminder of the nymph who chose to become the wild rather than be caught by the god who embodied it. And as you listen to those first sad, reedy notes hanging in the air, you understand that the chase led not just to transformation, but to the birth of a musical instrument that captured the very soul of the wild, and the enduring sorrow of a god's unfulfilled desire. You are still standing there, by the riverbank, just moments after the impossible has happened. Where the nymph Syrinx stood, desperate and fleeing, there is now only a cluster of reeds swaying gently in the breeze. Pan stands over them, his powerful form still, his breath coming slower now, no longer ragged with pursuit but perhaps catching on a new, unexpected emotion. He reached out and touched them, these green, hollow stalks that were moments ago the living, breathing form of the nymph he desired. He knows, with the deep, instinctual knowledge of a god of the wild, that she is in them, or are them. Her essence has flowed into these reeds, a final, ultimate merging with the natural world she belonged to, a desperate act of transformation that saved her from capture but cost her her form. It's a victory for her, a kind of freedom, but for Pan, it's the profound, sudden loss of the object of his desire. He stands there, the sound of the wind sighing through the reeds filling the silence left by the chase. And in that sound, he hears something new. Not just the generic rustle of plants, but a voice. A reedy, melancholic whisper that feels like it carries the echo of her fear, her plea, and perhaps a strange, sad beauty born from her transformation. He remembers the pipes he made earlier, the ones he practiced with, the ones he played in his failed serenade, crafted from similar reeds. But these are different. These reeds are syrinx. And in that moment, standing over the spot where she vanished into plant life, the idea solidifies. He will take these reeds, these physical manifestations of her escape, and make them into his instrument. It's a way to keep her close, in a sense, to always have a piece of her with him, transformed but still present. It's a way to give voice to the complex tangle of emotions warring within him, the thwarted desire, the loss, the strange reverence for her wild act of self-preservation. He reaches down again, and with surprising gentleness, or perhaps a controlled, focused power, he snaps or cuts several of the reeds that were syrinx. He selects them with care, choosing different lengths, just as he did before, but now each reed feels heavy with meaning, imbued with the spirit of the lost nymph. He takes them aside, perhaps sitting on that same smooth rock he considered for his serenade stage. He trims them, carefully measures them against each other, seals one end of each hollow tube, perhaps with the soft mud from the riverbank or a bit of beeswax he keeps for such tasks. He arranges them from shortest to longest and binds them together tightly with strong plant fibers. He works with a quiet intensity, his usual boisterous energy subdued by the weight of the moment. He is creating something new, something born directly from loss and transformation. This isn't just making an instrument, it's a ritual, a way of processing the events that just transpired, a way of turning a moment of failure and escape into a permanent, tangible form. He is literally crafting beauty from the ashes of his failed pursuit, or, more accurately, from the reeds of his transformed beloved. And as he works, binding the reeds together, the instrument takes shape. It is simple, rustic, a bundle of hollow tubes, open at the top to be blown across. It looks like other pipes, perhaps, but he knows its true origin. He holds it in his hands, the bundle of reeds that were syrinx, and names it after her. The syrinx. The panpipes. Forever linked to the nymph who chose to become reeds rather than be caught by the god of the wild. It's a name that carries both her identity and his connection to her, a bittersweet reminder of the chase and its outcome. It's like naming your guitar after the person who dumped you right before you wrote your best album, a constant, painful inspiration. He raises the newly formed syrinx to his lips. His earlier pipes, the ones he practiced with, are forgotten. This is his true instrument now, born from the very essence of his lost love. He blows across the open ends of the reeds. The sound that emerges is unlike anything he has played before, or anything heard regularly in Arcadia. It has the reedy quality of his earlier attempts, yes, the sound of wind through hollow tubes, but it is infused with a profound, piercing melancholy. It carries the whisper of the river, the rustle of the leaves, the raw voice of the wild, but woven through it is a thread of deep sorrow, of yearning, of loss. It is the sound of the wind sighing through the reeds where Syrinx now dwells, but it is shaped by Pan's own wild heart, broken and transformed by the experience. The notes are mournful, hauntingly beautiful. They speak of the chase, of the desperate plea, of the sudden, final transformation. They are the sound of desire unfulfilled, a beauty that remains just out of reach, even when held in his hands. It is the sound of Pan's wildness, yes, but tempered by sadness, given depth by the loss of Syrinx. This isn't the music for stirring up panic or guiding flocks. This is music for the quiet moments, for twilight, for the deep woods, for a lonely god reflecting on what he pursued and what he ultimately gained, not the nymph, but the instrument that embodies her escape. Historians still argue whether the ancient Greek syrinx, panpipes, was originally a pastoral instrument associated specifically with shepherds and the countryside, or if its association with Pan came first, solidifying its connection to wild, rustic music. Regardless, it became Pan's defining instrument, instantly recognizable as his voice in the natural world. This instrument, the syrinx, becomes Pan's constant companion. He carries it with him everywhere, through the forests, over the mountains, along the river banks where she became reeds. He plays it often, not just in planned performances, but spontaneously, whenever the mood strikes him. The music pours out of him, reflecting the ever-changing moods of the wild, sometimes mournful and quiet like a misty morning, sometimes lively and complex like a babbling brook, sometimes powerful and unsettling like a storm gathering on the peaks. But always underlying the melody is that unique, reedy, melancholic tone, the voice of Syrinx whispering within the sound of Pan. It's a sound that makes people pause. Shepherds hear it echoing across the valleys and know Pan is near. Travelers hear it in the deep woods and feel a strange mix of unease and enchantment. Other nymphs might hear it and feel a pang of recognition, a connection to the fate of their sister. It's a sound that is intrinsically linked to the landscape, like the call of a wild bird or the roar of a distant waterfall, but it is also deeply personal, carrying the story of a god and a nymph, a chase and a transformation. There's a quirky or fringe tidbit that some ancient Greek musicians believed that the specific materials used to make an instrument, and even the circumstances of its creation, could influence its sound and character. For Pan's pipes, made from the transformed body of a fleeing nymph, this idea takes on a particularly potent and poignant meaning. The very reeds themselves hold the memory of her escape, imbuing the music with that sense of elusive freedom and sorrow. It's like the instrument is haunted, but in a beautiful, melancholic way. The creation of the Syrinx didn't just give Pan a new instrument, it defined his musical identity. While other gods might be associated with the lyre, Apollo, representing order and harmony, or the Aulos, Dionysus, representing ecstatic frenzy, Pan's pipes became the voice of the wild itself, a sound that was both beautiful and unsettling, joyful and mournful, always connected to the earth and its untamed energies. It captured the dual nature of Arcadia and the god who embodied it. He had tried to impress Syrinx with his music, to use sound to bridge the gap between them. He failed to win her, but in her escape, he found the perfect instrument to express the very wildness he shared with her, a wildness that was now tinged with the enduring sorrow of his loss. The Syrinx pipes became his way of communicating with the world, of expressing his moods, his connection to nature, and his unending, bittersweet memory of the nymph who became reeds. Every note he plays is a reminder of the chase, the transformation, and the beautiful, melancholic sound born from a wild god's unfulfilled desire. And as you listen to the imagined sound of those reedy notes echoing through the Arcadian hills, you can hear not just the music of Pan, but the whispered voice of Syrinx, forever intertwined in the wild symphony of the ancient world. You are still standing there, by the riverbank, just moments after the impossible has happened. Where the nymph Syrinx stood, desperate and fleeing, there is now only a cluster of reeds swaying gently in the breeze. Pan stands over them, his powerful form still, his breath coming slower now, no longer ragged with pursuit but perhaps catching on a new, unexpected emotion. He reached out and touched them, these green, hollow stalks that were moments ago the living, breathing form of the nymph he desired. He knows, with the deep, instinctual knowledge of a god of the wild, that she is in them, or are them. Her essence has flowed into these reeds, a final, ultimate merging with the natural world she belonged to, a desperate act of transformation that saved her from capture but cost her her form. It's a victory for her, a kind of freedom, but for Pan, it's the profound, sudden loss of the object of his desire. He stands there, the sound of the wind sighing through the reeds filling the silence left by the chase. And in that sound, he hears something new. Not just the generic rustle of plants, but a voice. A reedy, melancholic whisper that feels like it carries the echo of her fear, her plea, and perhaps a strange, sad beauty born from her transformation. He remembers the pipes he made earlier, remember? The ones he practiced with, the ones he played in his failed serenade, crafted from similar reeds from this very riverbank. But these are different. These reeds are Syrinx. And in that moment, standing over the spot where she vanished into plant life, the idea solidifies. He will take these reeds, these physical manifestations of her escape, and make them into his instrument. It's a way to keep her close, in a sense, to always have a piece of her with him, transformed but still present. It's a way to give voice to the complex tangle of emotions warring within him, the thwarted desire, the loss, the strange reverence for her wild act of self-preservation. He reaches down again, and with surprising gentleness, or perhaps a controlled, focused power, he snaps or cuts several of the reeds that were syrinx. He selects them with care, choosing different lengths, just as he did before, but now each reed feels heavy with meaning, imbued with the spirit of the lost nymph. He takes them aside, perhaps sitting on that same smooth rock he considered for his serenade stage. He trims them, carefully measures them against each other, seals one end of each hollow tube, perhaps with the soft mud from the riverbank or a bit of beeswax he keeps for such tasks. He arranges them from shortest to longest and binds them together tightly with strong plant fibers. He works with a quiet intensity, his usual boisterous energy subdued by the weight of the moment. He is creating something new, something born directly from loss and transformation. This isn't just making an instrument, it's a ritual, a way of processing the events that just transpired, a way of turning a moment of failure and escape into a permanent, tangible form. He is literally crafting beauty from the ashes of his failed pursuit, or, more accurately, from the reeds of his transformed beloved. It's like trying to make a friendship bracelet out of the hair of someone who just ghosted you, maybe a little weird, but deeply symbolic in a way. And as he works, binding the reeds together, the instrument takes shape. It is simple, rustic, a bundle of hollow tubes, open at the top to be blown across. It looks like other pipes, perhaps, but he knows its true origin. He holds it in his hands, the bundle of reeds that were syrinx, and names it after her. The syrinx. The panpipes. Forever linked to the nymph who chose to become reeds rather than be caught by the god of the wild. It's a name that carries both her identity and his connection to her, a bittersweet reminder of the chase and its outcome. It's like naming your prize-winning orchid after the person who broke your heart, a constant, beautiful, slightly painful reminder. He raises the newly formed syrinx to his lips. His earlier pipes, the ones he practiced with, are forgotten. This is his true instrument now, born from the very essence of his lost love. He blows across the open ends of the reeds. The sound that emerges is unlike anything he has played before, or anything heard regularly in Arcadia. It has the reedy quality of his earlier attempts, yes, the sound of wind through hollow tubes, but it is infused with a profound, piercing melancholy. It carries the whisper of the river, the rustle of the leaves, the raw voice of the wild, but woven through it is a thread of deep sorrow, of yearning, of loss. It is the sound of the wind sighing through the reeds where Syrinx now dwells, but it is shaped by Pan's own wild heart, broken and transformed by the experience. The notes are mournful, hauntingly beautiful. They speak of the chase, of the desperate plea, of the sudden, final transformation. They are the sound of desire unfulfilled, a beauty that remains just out of reach, even when held in his hands. It is the sound of Pan's wildness, yes, but tempered by sadness, given depth by the loss of Syrinx. This isn't the music for stirring up panic or guiding flocks. This is music for the quiet moments, for twilight, for the deep woods, for a lonely god reflecting on what he pursued and what he ultimately gained, not the nymph, but the instrument that embodies her escape. Historians still argue whether the ancient Greek syrinx, panpipes, was originally a pastoral instrument associated specifically with shepherds and the countryside, or if its association with Pan came first, solidifying its connection to wild, rustic music. Regardless, it became Pan's defining instrument, instantly recognizable as his voice in the natural world, forever tied to this myth of loss and transformation. This instrument, the syrinx, becomes Pan's constant companion. He carries it with him everywhere, through the forests, over the mountains, along the river banks where she became reeds. He plays it often, not just in planned performances, but spontaneously, whenever the mood strikes him. The music pours out of him, reflecting the ever-changing moods of the wild, sometimes mournful and quiet like a misty morning, sometimes lively and complex like a babbling brook, sometimes powerful and unsettling like a storm gathering on the peaks. But always underlying the melody is that unique, reedy, melancholic tone, the voice of Syrinx whispering within the sound of Pan. It's a sound that makes people pause. Shepherds hear it echoing across the valleys and know Pan is near. Travelers hear it in the deep woods and feel a strange mix of unease and enchantment. Other nymphs might hear it and feel a pang of recognition, a connection to the fate of their sister. It's a sound that is intrinsically linked to the landscape, like the call of a wild bird or the roar of a distant waterfall, but it is also deeply personal, carrying the story of a god and a nymph, a chase and a transformation. There's a quirky or fringe tidbit that some ancient Greek musicians believed that the specific materials used to make an instrument, and even the circumstances of its creation, could influence its sound and character. For Pan's pipes, made from the transformed body of a fleeing nymph, this idea takes on a particularly potent and poignant meaning. The very reeds themselves hold the memory of her escape, imbuing the music with that sense of elusive freedom and sorrow. It's like the instrument is haunted, but in a beautiful, melancholic way that only Pan could truly appreciate and express. The creation of the syrinx didn't just give Pan a new instrument, it defined his musical identity. While other gods might be associated with the lyre, Apollo, representing order and harmony, or the aulos, Dionysus, representing ecstatic frenzy, Pan's pipes became the voice of the wild itself, a sound that was both beautiful and unsettling, joyful and mournful, always connected to the earth and its untamed energies. It captured the dual nature of Arcadia and the god who embodied it. He had tried to impress Syrinx with his music, to use sound to bridge the gap between them. He failed to win her, but in her escape, he found the perfect instrument to express the very wildness he shared with her, a wildness that was now tinged with the enduring sorrow of his loss. The Syrinx pipes became his way of communicating with the world, of expressing his moods, his connection to nature, and his unending, bittersweet memory of the nymph who became reeds. Every note he plays is a reminder of the chase, the transformation, and the beautiful, melancholic sound born from a wild god's unfulfilled desire. And as you listen to the imagined sound of those reedy notes echoing through the Arcadian hills, you can hear not just the music of Pan, but the whispered voice of Syrinx, forever intertwined in the wild symphony of the ancient world. And now, as the sounds of Pan's pipes begin to fade, and the last echoes of the chase settle back into the quiet rustle of the leaves and the gentle flow of the river, you can feel yourself drifting back from the ancient forests of Arcadia. The images of wild gods and fleeing nymphs, of reedy music and dappled sunlight, soften and blur around the edges. The air here, wherever you are listening from, feels calmer, more familiar. The sounds of your own world gently return, the soft hum of the fan, the quiet breathing, the comforting silence of the night. The story is complete, the chase ended, the music found. There's nothing left to fear here now, just the quiet space between waking and dreaming, filled perhaps with the faint, distant echo of a reedy melody, a reminder of a wild god and a nymph who became the very essence of his song. Let the last whisper of the panpipes carry you away, into the quiet dark, where stories and dreams mingle like sunlight and shadow in an Arcadian glade. Just breathe deeply, feel the stillness, and let yourself relax completely. Sweet dreams.